Hi everyone, Elle Hackney here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I get to speak to those in the book community. Today's guest is someone that I'm absolutely fascinated by. This Australian author has a fascination with memory and consciousness, and her debut novel, All You Took From Me, has just been released. So, with a mix of those two, I just couldn't help but to ask Lisa Kenway to come on my show to talk about her book. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren.
Where did all this come from? Because memory and consciousness is such a massive topic and a broad one. How did all this come about?
So, this is my novel, debut thriller, All You Took From Me, and it draws pretty heavily on my work as an anaesthetist. So, I guess the obvious answer is that in my day job, I deal with memory and consciousness every single day. I'm giving drugs that affect memory and consciousness. So, the obvious answer is that that's my interest. But, it goes quite a long way back from that. I've certainly had head knocks and brushes with retrograde amnesia, and we all have this experience, I think, of recalling things very differently to other people in our family or friends who might remember an event differently to us. And so all those elements came together in this, and I wanted to make it a little bit more than just an exploration of anesthesia, but anesthesia is certainly at the core of it.
Wow, how long did it take you to come up with the concept with all that knowledge? Because it seems to me like a topic where it's a rabbit hole. Like, how do you condense it to one novel?
Uh, with great difficulty. No, I mean, it's like any novel. When you're writing a story, you need to find the essence of that story, and that starts with character and then build from there. So I have a protagonist who's an anaesthetist with memory loss and who feels very strongly that she needs to regain those memories for all sorts of reasons. So that gave me the initial premise, and then I just built from there. But you're right, it was a rabbit hole that I could disappear down for weeks if I wasn't careful, because a lot of that information I have at my fingertips because of my professional experience. So the anesthesia itself didn't require a lot of research, but memory itself is such a huge concept, and there's so much we don't understand about it that I did find myself reading a lot of articles, popular science research articles, and and just trying to answer questions as they came up, because otherwise I would have got mired in research for years potentially, I think.
Yeah, and that's with this because it is so fascinating, and you're seeing a range of situations. It's not so black and white. It's and what happens with research 10 years ago is very different to now, and so on. Do you find as well your patients and their sort of their reactions? Did that influence your book at all?
I would like to say that, there are no patients in the book. There's no specific experience that's reflected in the story. But I think I probably drew on all those experiences over the years, to make it authentic, I guess, adds authenticity to it. But there's no particular patient story that is in the novel. But I find it fascinating that I will have repeat patients come to me a month later after their first surgery or sometime down the track, and invariably will say, "Oh, I didn't come into the operating theatre awake last time. I was asleep before I came in here. I remember it clearly." But they don't remember it clearly. They remember fractions of the story of what happened to them. And then their brain has sewn it all together as a cohesive narrative. And that in itself is fascinating to me, that we all think we remember things clearly, but our brain plays tricks on us and fills the gaps that we've forgotten. I've probably forgotten the question you asked in the rambling answer.
No,
Did I
it
answer?
was yeah, you did because you know you're seeing anesthesia from from one side, whereas all these other patients who, you're right, like it's it's their first experience. They've had an accident or a trauma. They've had their first experience with it. And you're seeing all these people from their own experiences have these memory losses, and or it's coming back a different way and things like that. But you see that constantly because it's your
Mm-hmm.
role. And I was curious to know, did all of that come into your story? So yeah, you did. You answered it perfectly. I am curious with this type of book though, because it is what it is and it's come from what it's come from, memory, consciousness, your experience with anesthesia. How many rewrites did it take?
So many rewrites. I don't know. I lost count. This story began at the very end of 2017. Probably took about 2 years of working on it by myself and with some beta reader advice, beta readers and an editor, before I was ready to start sending it out. And even at that point, it took another 3 years of pitching it to get it picked up by a publisher. And during that time, I was applying feedback as I got it. And then after being picked up by the publisher, I then went through another structural edit and copy edit. So I have lost count of the number of iterations it's been through. The plot is quite complex. The character is complex and layered, and that developed in the rewriting.
Because I did see it got nominated for the Richell Prize.
Mm.
Um, but then it had to be sort of changed again. How do you go with that? Because no doubt you get to a point where you feel, right, it's done, but then you're asked to sort of add more to it. How do you go with that?
I think it depends on how strong you're feeling at that point when you get the feedback and how much work you've already put in. It feels like a marathon writing a novel. And at various points along the way, you do get bombarded with this feedback that sends you back to the drawing board. I think the most valuable feedback, but also the most difficult, probably came with the editor that worked with me through my publisher, because the novel was almost there, so close that the publisher agreed to take it on the proviso that we tidied up a few things that weren't quite working. And when the editor came back to me with those things, I did take a few days to figure out how I was going to do that and to reconcile with making further great changes after working on this novel for years already. I was more than happy to do that, and it's a much better story for it, but it's exhausting. And at a certain point, I was wondering if I'd be able to pull it off, if I would be able to bring all those changes together and make the novel better than it was. And thankfully, you just have to put faith in the experience and knowledge of these publishing professionals and do the work. And once I'd done the work, I was really grateful that I had. But yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. And taking feedback can be quite challenging, especially when you've been working on something for a very long time. But I was very open to it. I knew how much value they would add. But yeah, it was a lot of work.
Because that is also something for aspiring authors who would just love to be where you're at. It is
Mm.
then thinking, okay, how does this actually look? Because you're managing your role, your day job, and let's face it, yours is quite serious. It's something that it's not a drop a ball kind of role.
Mm.
How did you find managing your career, writing this book, but then having to deal with structural edit deadlines? How did you deal with all that?
Well, I'm really fortunate that my publisher was quite generous with the deadlines that I had. So I had 18 months between signing the contract and my book coming out. So that allowed quite a bit of time for those edits to happen. So that was one positive thing. I'm quite good at time management, so I carved out time when I needed it. I took a week off work and went away and just got stuck in. And I just made it work. And also, I've dropped my clinical hours down so that I'm allowing myself time to write through the week. So it's a trade-off sometimes. I've gone to part-time because I want to give everything that I can to the writing. And if I hadn't done that, you're right, I wouldn't have the time or the headspace to do it.
Mm. Do you use programs like Plotter, or do you stick to a Word document?
I use Scrivener when I'm writing because I'm sure I don't understand half the functions and I probably use a quarter of them at the most. But I like that you can write in scenes and move the scenes around and get a visual of the structure of the manuscript and color code things if you need to color code different points of view or whatever. And I find that works well for my brain. Just the way I work. I know it does not work for everyone. And then I dump it into Word when I'm at the, I guess, tightening up the language copy edit stage beyond the restructuring stage. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good to sort of know how you've made this all happen. What do you know about the publishing industry now that you didn't before?
Oh, that is a very big question. So much. On the positive side, I would say that the industry is just full of people who love books and reading, and they do actually want to support authors. They do want to take more authors on, and they do want to make your work as good as it can be. So it's quite a collaborative process. I think I knew that on an intellectual level, but I think being in it, you see just how collaborative it is. But the flip side of that is that authors also need to do an awful lot to promote their work, and they need to be proactive and get behind themselves in their book. Even if you're traditionally published, that still applies. And I think a lot of people are surprised by that. The publicity window is quite small. The support you get is there, but the publishers obviously have a lot of other authors and books that they're also promoting. And so as an author, you do need to be a bit proactive and take the reins as well.
With that in mind, tell me, what's the best feedback you've got with your book so far?
The best feedback during or after it came out?
Just by any readers who've read it, who love it.
Yeah. Oh, that has probably been the highlight of the whole thing. It's twofold, really. It's people that I really respect reading my book and saying wonderful things about it. So other authors like J.P. Pomaran, Hayley Scrivener, and Petronella McGovern, and all of these other people buying my book, reading it, promoting it on social media as being something that's worth reading. That really is amazing, that feeling. Being reviewed. Reviews are hard to get, but when you do get a review, that's a great feeling too. But probably equal to all those are all the friends and family and colleagues who've sent messages, people haven't read a book for years and picked my book up and said that they couldn't put it down, that it reminded them how much they used to love reading and that they might start reading again. And that is gold,
Have you always wanted to write?
I've always been a reader,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really come to writing seriously until I was probably about 10 years ago, I would say. But looking back, as a kid, I wrote poetry. I loved writing short stories. I even put out a family newsletter once, forced my sister to write articles for it. And I think there was only one issue because I was the only one who wanted to do it. But the signs were there. And then at some point in the middle of high school, I had to decide which way I wanted to go because I was a bit of an all-rounder. And I chose the math science path because I wanted to do medicine. And that, as you can imagine, was all consuming for about 2 decades. And it wasn't until my specialist training was finished, my career was sort of established, my kids were at school, I looked around and thought, I really need something creative in my life. And that's when I went back to writing.
That's an amazing journey. What's next for you though, Lisa?
I'm currently editing another suspense novel that's I don't want to talk too much about really because I don't want to jinx it, but yeah, this one's set on the coast. This one's not medical, and there's a little bit of an environmental theme as well. But it's mainly about families and lies that we tell ourselves, and there's a little bit about memory in this one as well.
Can't wait. Okay, it's something to look forward to. So, anyone out there watching this interview captivated by Lisa would like to contact her. Lisa, how do we contact you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is lisakenway.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Lisa Kenway or on Facebook at Lisa Kenway Author. I've just left Twitter, like everyone in the mass exodus has left Twitter, and I haven't quite made it over to Blue Sky yet. So Instagram is probably your best bet.
Perfect. So anyone watching this video, please let's support authors like Lisa. We want her to stick around and we want her to produce more fascinating, suspenseful books. Make sure when you are purchasing the books, so you review them, make sure you leave reviews on Goodreads, make sure you share Lisa's content, make sure you follow her, support her any which way possible, because we want to see what else happens for this amazing author. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me today. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.